Three, two, one.
And we're recording. We're live. So, hey, this is the season 1, episode 2 of Third Party Threat Hunters, the podcast. Let me share the little graphic we got here for that, so we can cue it up. Eventually, loading. While we deal with those technical difficulties, why don't we just do introductions? My name is Greg Rassner. I'm the host of the podcast, along with Al Molik, that third-party guy. I currently have working on a new book with Wiley called Zero Trust and Third-Party Risk, Reduce the Blast Radius. Excited about working on that. And, of course, had the first book out that's up there in the graphic. Al, you want to just give a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. My website, thatthirdpartyguy.com, reviewing just items that I run across in third party. Very passionate about the subject, so very happy to be here today. My day job also is a cybersecurity manager for a large financial institution. But more importantly, Dustin, over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and it's going to be tough to follow Julie on this one. But my name is Dustin Sachs. My day job, I'm the Senior Manager in charge of governance, risk, and compliance for World Fuel Services. In addition to that, I'm also a Doctorate of Computer Science candidate at Colorado Technical University, as well as somebody who focuses a lot on the TPRM side of things. That's actually my research focus is on TPRM. So very passionate about TPRM and looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, and Dustin, I think you and I first met each other through the Third Party Risk Association and actually Julie's organization. So that makes sense that we would connect in that way. And I know one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is your posts on LinkedIn and other your own podcasts and or your blogs, that you have on the subjects are very passionate and I think are very directive. I've seen you engage as well with folks like Robert Wood and others that we've also engaged with right on LinkedIn, and their passion around some of the missteps that we see in the industry. And in particular, one of the things that we wanted to really process today and talk about was your passion and a passion of Al's and mine as well, that the TPRM is a process, not tools. And I'll even cue it up even easier for you in some ways, Dustin, because if you look on the reviews of my book on Amazon, this isn't a shameless plug for my book, but it's a show of where people's heads are. There's a reviewer there that gave me 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, that's still good. But his comment was, or her comment was that, hey, there's not a lot of technical stuff in here. It's all about process and program. Yes, exactly. I wish I could do a reply, not because I want to, not because I think I understand where that reader's point is coming from, but that's just the point that you're trying to make, is that it isn't about the technology. And I try and make that point in the book and other conversations I have with people is, I don't care if you're doing it on Excel or you have a full-blown Archer implementation, as long as you've got a process that you've got defined and you're following it, that's what it is, right? And
I'll start off from there. I'll start off with a plug for your book, because having read it cover to cover multiple times now, I recommend anybody who's interested in third-party risk read the book. I'm not getting paid to say that by Greg, as far as I know.
Sorry, I've been sitting in my eye. Sorry.
I'd like to see some pictures in that book, by the way, something I can color.
Yeah, a color by numbers thing would be kind of cool.
The Dummies book's coming out for you, Al, later.
Perfect.
No, I think the point of all of this is, I started out and I came up through the kind of computer forensics and digital forensics world. And one of the things that you get taught very early on in that process is you have to understand what the tools are doing. You have to understand what's going on behind the scenes. What is the process that the tool is running, so that when you ultimately, as I've had to do, get up and have to testify about it, you can explain what's going on. And I take that same kind of sentiment to TPRM and to the GRC side of things, which is, you could go out, you could buy an Archer, you could buy, a top of the line TPRM, GRC risk management tool. But if you don't have good process in place and you don't have a good foundation in place, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to introduce things that into the situation that are going to cause problems down the line. You're not going to be using the tool to its fullest extent, or you're going to use the tool the way that the developer wants you to use it, not the way that fits best for your organization. And that's, I think, the important thing. So you've got to start with, what are the foundational frameworks and standards and guidelines that I need to be abiding by from a TPRM standpoint, and also what is my process going to look like? What is it going to look like to the user? What is it going to look like to the business person? And what is it going to look like for my team going through the process? Because, even if, like you said, it's Excel is perfectly okay for a very beginning, what we'll call immature program. But you still need to have that process in place and that understanding, because otherwise you're going to introduce things that, things we've talked about before, Greg, things like, cognitive bias into the mix. You're going to introduce things like poor processes. You're not going to have them aligned to your controls. You're not going to have them aligned to the standards and frameworks. You're not going to have a good continuous monitoring program. And if you're ISO certified or any of the other certifications out there, you get asked about continuous monitoring. So having a real well-defined process then helps you find the best tool. The other, the last point I'll make is, by having a good process, you may not need to go out and buy the top of the line tool, because you may realize, you don't need the Ferrari as much as you would like the Ferrari. You don't need the Ferrari. You can get by with the Dodge Dart.
Well, you bring up the exact right point.
Ask for the Ferrari, because you're only going to get Yugo. You're going to only get a Yugo budget anyways. Yeah. So just ask for the Ferrari, so you get the Yugo anyways. Right?
I've sold Yugos before. Those, you don't want one of those. Yeah. No, the reality is, you said the exact right thing, right? Which is that the tool is there to augment your process, not the other way around. And we do that a lot throughout any kind of IT or anywhere else that goes on, I think. But I agree with you, right? Right tool for the job. You've got to be able to, you're using the tool to try to automate and emphasize and increase the quality and the productivity of what you're doing, not to be the process. I don't buy Excel because it teaches me how to do math. I use Excel to emphasize what I'm trying to get done. I don't use other tools in that way either, right? They're not supplementing or they're not supplanting what it is that I want to do. They're helping me to do what I want to do better.
Yeah, I mean, good luck going to tell your auditor, well, the tool just does it.
Right?
I mean, good luck giving that an answer. And see, if anyone listening gives that answer to an auditor and the auditor says, cool, no problem, send me a message on LinkedIn and I will send you, I will send you my life savings, because I want to
work in a company where the third line is that lax.
I cannot imagine a single auditor out there going, yeah, okay, they're just using a tool. That's cool. That's good.
I feel like they're looking for grammar errors as well. It's, for God's sakes,
So that, I think the point is, it's easy for us to say, you know what, okay, I'll just go out and I'll buy a tool. And, I've seen this kind of in the implementation that we've had of our GRC tool, is we implemented a tool. We had to have a good process in place, and we established a good process. And that's let us figure out what are the shortcomings of the tool. It's also let us come out with how do we make this tool work with our process, not how do you work the process into the tool.
Well, I think what you end up with then, in some cases, and I know that most of us see in this in some places, is you get a tool that then is over customized because they thought the tool was the answer, and it's really the process and then the tool, right?
Because then you spend your entire time developing the tool to do what you want, as opposed to finding the tool that's going to kind of do it for you,
or just enhance what you're doing. Yeah. Just to enhance what you're already doing is the piece.
Yeah.
So how do you see people figuring out that process then? It seems to me it should be iterative.
Yeah, I mean, so there are some I think there are really good starting points out there, and I know that in cybersecurity and in non-governmental cybersecurity, oftentimes people kind of cringe when they hear the term NIST. But I will say NIST from a supply chain cybersecurity standpoint has gotten a lot better over the last years. I think with version 5 of the NIST cybersecurity framework, or NIST 853, they realized that cyber supply chain is important. I think there are some really good documents. NIST Special Application 161, which is kind of the gold standard, or the kind of go-to for supply chain, is really good. If you've got nothing, it's a good place to start. I think that as well, CISA or CISA or whatever, however you pronounce it, however you want to pronounce it, because I know
CISA.
that one.
I think
that
one's
CISA. Similar to CISO, and how to pronounce CISO. I don't want to start turf wars here or anything. I get into politics, but
it's gotta be this, yeah.
But they've done a really good job as well on developing some real good material around. They focused mostly on what they call ICT, or Internet and Communications Technology,
right?
But the
term nobody uses
created
except for them.
Very transferable,
right? A term that nobody uses except for them. Yeah. So it makes it like, what do they mean by that, right?
We should put in a plug. We should put in a plug.
Go read the definition of what ICT is. It's anybody who makes or works with internet or communications technology, which is everybody. Every cybersecurity, every IT team deals with ICT.
Yeah. So why make it so anyway? Yeah.
So you should probably put in a plug as well, right, for TPRA, who also is coming up with frameworks and starter packs and things like that. To help out.
Definitely. I think that's true. I think people like Greg, who have been training people within TPRA, and who have been developing things within TPRA for many years now. Certainly, I know there's a lot of questionnaires and frameworks and things that are being worked on as well by many people within TPRA. So definitely another good resource. But yeah, I mean, I think that I've always kind of kept in the back of my mind a quote that I first saw and I'm going to throw back a very old or an older pop culture reference, but I first saw this quote in Pirates of Silicon Valley. If you remember the movie, it's the movie about Microsoft and Apple, and Noah Wiley from ER in it. And there's a scene where he's playing Steve Jobs, where he talks about the quote from Pablo Picasso: "Good artists borrow, great artists steal." And I think that's a really good mantra if you think about it, because you don't have to be sitting there going, how do I do this? I need to start from scratch. Take what's already out there. Leverage what's already out there. There's some really good processes. I think one of the things we've done really well in cybersecurity over the last couple of years is we started to increase the information sharing and the willingness to share. Hey, here's a document that I created that I think would be really good for you to use. It's become less of a scary, they're going to steal our intellectual property, and more of a let's do this as a team sport.
When I got hired on at BB&T to take on that third-party risk, cyber third-party risk role there, I looked for a book, and there really wasn't one. There wasn't a lot of literature. Most of the TPRM books would have a chapter on cyber, but that was it. It's not a knock on those books. It's just that wasn't sufficient to really cover the material that I think is needed. So the approach that I took along with Al is you create a program that's cyber focused. Forget compliance. Forget all the other third party risk. Probably the fact that I had not done it before was helpful, because I didn't come in with any preconceived ways of doing it. We just said, okay, how do we do this in a way that is cyber focused and not compliance focused, right? Not just get third and fourth line off our backs, but actually create, identify risk and then work to close that risk, right? That's the issue, right? For us.
Yeah. I mean,
we're talking,
it's the old saying, compliance does not equal security.
No.
Well, it's something that you're doing it's something you're doing because somebody else told you to, as opposed to doing the right thing, which is, hey, let's make this stuff secure, right? I'm not saying they don't overlap, but your reason for doing it doesn't impact. It impacts your final quality in what goes out there.
Well, the big difference is SolarWinds. SolarWinds and Colonial Pipeline were really what changed the conversation, right? I was, it's not that it was ignored before. It's just that folks like myself and you, Dustin, and Julie and others, were it was a very small candles in a big open space, right? And then suddenly with SolarWinds and in particular Colonial Pipeline, when you mess with somebody's gas, Americans' gas, they get really upset, really upset. And so then the regulators start looking at it. And it's so important that you actually had three agencies that never talk to each other, the OCC, FDIC, and FRB, suddenly do a joint interagency guidance. That never would have happened had it not been for those two events and others, right? So you now have supply chain requirements like S-bombs and stuff coming out for government work. Again, that never would have happened had it not been for that. The upside for as you were saying, Dustin, is now there's a lot of information coming around that will help folks who want to start or mature a program, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and to just add to the kind of the litany of examples, if we're talking about even, for a more global audience as well, you think of, the WannaCry National Health Services a couple summers ago. You think of, where they were, it was ransoming hospitals, and then you talk about things like Log4j as another one that affected pretty much the entire world. But
Al still has involuntary muscle spasms when you say the word Log4j.
I do. I have an upcoming speech on the topic too. Yeah, for the TPRM
organization.
You volunteered for that? Sorry.
Yeah.
I think the big thing is we have to look at, especially, and one of the things that I don't think gets taught or considered as much that I know some of my colleagues in my doctoral program are starting to look at is, remember that, we had been working towards this idea of cloud-based and remote work, but March 13th, 2020 changed things significantly for us. And we globally went to this, almost fully remote world. And that just accelerated. It was gasoline on the need, or, on the working with third parties. Organizations had to create situations where they could work remotely and work outside of their kind of four walls. And that I think also was a catalyst to the need for third party to be important. I mean, you can't look, I don't know of an organization out there anymore that can claim that they don't have some significant, involvement in the third party or in supply chain. I mean, if we even just look at what happened, was 2 years ago now, with the Evergreen, the ship in the Suez Canal that turned and shut, became a huge issue. You look at what happened with the global supply chain as a result of COVID. I mean, the fact that you couldn't get, you still can't in a lot of places, still can't get, decent supply of cars because the computer chips that were needed for the cars aren't being manufactured quick enough.
Do you think those things are actually March 13th? Do you think it actually created the issue? You think it just shone the light on the issue?
I think it accelerated the issue. As I said, I think it accelerated the issue. I think one of the big things that it did, and this is something that I've been kind of working with one of my classmates to kind of to investigate further from an academic standpoint, is I think it identified, it caused a lot of organizations to realize that the policies and procedures and processes they had in place were ill-equipped to handle a sudden shift like that and a move to a third-party dependent world.
Well, the sudden shift I get, right? I kind of feel like this was something that was just waiting to happen. It was gas leaking and waiting for a spark, type of deal, right? Like for the last 50 years they've been teaching in the MBA courses about supply chains and the rest. You remember the Ford Fiesta was Ford's example of how to build a car cheaper by using a global supply chain. It was a big experiment, basically, right? And then you look at fast forward all this time, and were we just waiting for this stuff to explode? And then, yeah, sure, we got a pandemic and we got, giant Log4j and Colonial Pipeline and the rest, but chicken or egg?
I mean, if you look back at the timeline of things as well, I mean, you go back to, we'll go back to 2014, Target. I mean, Target happened. Everyone was up in arms. Oh my God, how can this happen? And oh my God, I got to be worried about my vendors. And the HVAC vendor now is in play. And we sat for 6 years and
nobody did anything.
Nothing.
Right.
As issue after issue after issue after issue. SolarWinds hits in 2020, and now all of a sudden everybody's like, oh okay, now we got to worry.
And I think the big difference there is, unfortunately, there was no regulatory requirement for most of those 20 years, except in the finance space. And again, the finance space, and no knock at my own space, but a lot of them did it as a compliance function, not as a cybersecurity function, right? Some do it the right way. I'm not saying at all. This is not a blanket statement, but a lot of them did it. But at least they were doing it. Right.
Yeah.
I think where you're getting it now is, and some of the difference will be that now that it's going to be more regulatory required, and you've got regulatory requirements coming out of in multiple sectors, you're inevitably going to have folks be required to do it, or they're going to be sued into doing it.
Well, and I think beyond regulatory,
regulatory.
Yeah, I mean, and I think beyond regulatory, I think what's really starting to drive it, what I've kind of seen since SolarWinds in 2020 is you're now seeing your customers and both sides of, unless you're sitting on one end of the supply chain or the other, unless you're at the very, very, very end of the supply chain and you're the end customer. Right. Everywhere else on the supply chain, you're being asked by the company above the player above you or below you on the chain, right. What are you doing about third party? So, it's become something that people have finally realized they need to care about, they need to worry about. It's starting to get closer and closer and closer to affecting life and limb. And, when you have supply chain issues involving, getting things to
hospitals,
war zones, right? Or hospitals, you have people, even more as you're starting to see some of the things with IoT devices, even as well. Some of the stuff that's happening with that.
So I'm just looking at a time here. I want to kind of keep us. I want to start to kind of bring us to a close for the folks who are listening. And I think we covered a lot of good points here. Again, it's process, not tools, right? If you focus in on how your process is designed, the tools will kind of work themselves out, right? And you may even, to your point, Dustin, may not need a lot of tooling, or you may not need the Cadillac of tools. You may be sufficient with the Ford Fiesta of tools to pick up on your thing, right? I
think we look at on our team at World Fuel, on our cybersecurity team, we definitely look at what we call, and I'm going to have to pay royalty to my peer on this because I'm about to use a term that he is trying to trademark.
Trying.
We're talking about a concept of the tools that you've got even in your in-house and the juice to squeeze ratio. If you look, what's really interesting is
this is a PG-13. You keep going.
No, I like that one.
Organizations are relying on the Microsoft suite, perhaps as their kind of primary productivity suite. There are a lot of tools in there that you can leverage to effectively handle your TPRM process if you don't have a tool and can't go out and get a tool.
Agreed.
I mean, between some of the Power Automate and Power Apps and Excel,
workflows all built in, and
if you've got a Microsoft E3 or an E5 license, you've got a lot of tools in your arsenal already to do a lot of the work you want to do, and not have to go out and get something else. So if you're in a situation like a lot of organizations right now with the way the economy is and what have you, and you're having to do more with less, you have a lot of the tools at your disposal. The problem is if you don't have a good process, you're not going to know, hey, I can actually go use this tool to accomplish what I need to accomplish.
Right. And there are a lot of open source tools, everything from Open Office. If you're really at that level of maturity where you're really trying to use there's even open source stuff. Because what we're talking about is for any process or program, you need to have an inventory of what you're going to be doing. So that's like I said, it's either Excel or Archer or some big product, right? Or Microsoft's Microsoft database.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
But even so, if you got to remember that our end users, the business users who are going to go through this process, we can't just say to them, "Oh, go use this tool," and that's how to do it. You got to be able to say, "This is what I need you to do. I need you to go in. I need you to fill out this information. Here's the information I need from you. Here's what I mean when I say the word use case. I don't just want to know how are you going to use it, but what data are you putting into it? Here's what I mean by each type of data. And if you answer this, that it includes, PII, understand that means it's going to automatically make it a high or critical risk vendor because we've got a data classification policy that says that this is high or critical data or it's regulated or whatever." But people are more apt to use tools or use to adhere to what you're asking them to do if you give them a easy to follow process and an easy to follow procedure. But you've got to define that yourself and understand the process yourself. The other thing is you can't.
What would you say? Hang on. So, what would you say about there's a new suite of tools coming out by some vendors that actually have that process stuff built into it, right? So to sort of as an easy button for you to, I won't mention the vendors' names, but most folks know who I'm talking about. There's a few of them in that I've run across that have some of this as a sort of a SaaS product that you can unbox, and it does it has the process built into it, And I'm not asking you to endorse a product, just as a category. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so not completely opposed to it. I think it's okay to have a tool that has a process built in out of the box, as long as you have a proper understanding of the process and that you've documented the process, and that you're not just saying, "Oh, well, we're using the process that's built into the tool," and not having a proper understanding of it. Because what ends up happening is as everyone on this call knows, and everyone on this who's probably listening to this that deals with TPRM every day knows, the two things that are most likely to happen are you get a request for a third-party assessment the day before the contract has to be signed. So
never seen that happen.
You got to understand, have a good process in place, because you can't just put it in the tool and expect it to be
say
done.
it isn't so, Dustin. No, really.
I want to work somewhere where it happens before. That's where I want to be.
And the other thing that ends up happening is you get the question of, okay, I am submitting this. I'm submitting this. How long is it going to take? And if you don't understand what the process is, you're just throwing it at the tool. You're not going to be able to tell them, well, it's going to take 2 weeks, or it's going to take 7 days, or it's going to take.
I think what you need in that what you're getting at is you need transparency for the end user, whether it's line of business or the vendor to some extent, where it is in that process, so you get less queries about, well, how much longer.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and
are we there
yet?
Way
you can do that is understanding the process and having it defined and understanding at each step, what the process is, how long the process is going to take, but that's all about defining the process. And then, for the situations that Al, I know, kind of alluded to, where you get it and we signed the contract 3 weeks ago, and oh, by the way, now we want you to have a security check on it, which again never happens. But
no, never happens.
No, I never seen that.
You got to be able to be able to say, okay, well, we're not going to just put it in the tool. We've got to follow. Again, it's all about process, because a tool will only be an effective. You'll only get a good ROI on your tools if you've got a process underlying it.
I'm throwing an audible. We're at 30 minutes, so I want to just wrap it up so that the users don't think that we're sitting at a bar having a conversation for the next 2 hours, which we could probably.
I like this idea for next time. Yeah.
Well, the third-party drunk threat hunters.
Okay.
But that's like drunk history.
I'll throw out another plug. If anybody out there wants to have a 2.5 or let's say 2 days full of sitting around talking about TPRM. Sign up for the TPRA Spring Conference in Nashville. That's what we're doing for 2.5 days.
We'll be there. And by the way, you can make a drinking game of my training, because every time I say the word risk-based in my training, you have to take a shot. Which means in the first 15 minutes you're done.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I think what we should do is for the drinking game. I'll just say this: what I think we should do is every time Greg plugs his book, we should have to take a shot, because then we'll really be in trouble.
I can tolerate that one.
Yeah, I might clam up suddenly. All right, Dustin, it's been great having you on. Appreciate the time, and I'm looking forward to getting some feedback from viewers. But and again, Hal, thanks for co-hosting. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
It was a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to it all week, Dustin.
Yeah, TPRM's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. We put cyber third party.
Yeah, don't do that.
No.
PG-13, man.
Yeah. I'll leave that one alone.
Yeah.
Talk amongst yourselves.
That'll be cut. Yeah.
All right, later, guys.
Edit that out.
Yeah,
that's right.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.